Hello, boys and girls. My name is Latina Gayden. I teach third grade math at Roy Neal Shelling Elementary School. Today, I will be giving you a math lesson. Let's talk about area. Okay, boys and girls, today we're talking about area. And we need to know, first of all, what is area? So first let's look at our objectives today. Our objectives tell us what we're trying to learn today. So I always tell my children you should always leave class and you should know something that you didn't know before. So that's why we get into our objectives. They tell us exactly what our targets are for today and what we should get out of the lesson. And it's okay if we don't get everything today. There will be there will be review when you get back to school, and then we'll have a second lesson to help us also. So let's look at today's objective. Our objective today says, I can find the area of plane figures, okay? So, first of all, in order for us to know how to find area of plane figures, we need to actually understand what area is and what a plane figure is. And for some of you, this might be review. So my question says, but wait, what is area? What is a plane figure? So let's get into some vocabulary, okay? Area is how much space an object takes up. It tells us how much space is inside a figure. So the first time I taught area in class, when I would ask my students, what is area? They would always want to tell me how big something is. And I always told them that's not necessarily correct because big can mean anything. Big can be talking about height, big can be talking about weight. We don't know. We're specifically talking about area, which is how much space something takes up, okay? Now, a plane figure is a flat, closed figure. We have some examples like triangles, squares, and rectangles. Those are all polygons, which are a flat, closed figure with straight sides. So that's what we'll be basically looking at today, okay? Now, we use unit squares to measure area, okay? So I know you want to know, what is a unit square? Well, if you look at my picture here, I have a yellow square where all the sides are exactly the same length, okay? So a unit square is a square with sides of exactly 1 unit, okay? So what we're doing when we find area, we're trying to find out how many of these unit squares are inside a closed figure or a plane figure, okay? So, what I often tell my students is when you think about area, think about the floor in our classroom, okay? When you look down at the floor, you see what? You see tiles, okay? So, if someone was constructing a building or something like that, they would need to know exactly how many tiles they were supposed to have in order to complete the room. You don't want to have too many or you don't have not enough, okay? So what they'll do is they'll find the area of the room and it will tell them how many tiles they need, okay? So when we think about it, the easiest way to find area would be to actually count the squares that fit inside the figure. If you look, I tried to find something that resembled my classroom tiles, which are blue tiles. So what we can actually do is we could count those, okay? So what I always tell my students is it's really easy to mess up counting when you're just pointing and counting. So what I like to tell my students to do is to actually number the squares as they're counting. And that will make sure that you don't skip any numbers and that you won't repeat a number, okay? So let's try that. So I'm going to start with my first tile and I'm going to start numbering my tiles until I finish, okay? So let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So as you can see, boys and girls, 8 unit squares fit inside of this rectangle. So when I'm talking about area, you guys, it's very important that I don't just say that the area is 8. The area is not 8. What we say is it is 8 square units, okay? We want to make sure that we always include our unit at the end of how many tiles we have or what our area is, okay? So that's the easiest way to find area, okay? So, like I said, the area is 8 square units, and this part is very important, you guys. Do not forget to list your unit after you find out what's the area. Now, let's look at this rectangle. Now you'll notice that in this rectangle, boys and girls, there are no unit squares in my figure. But that doesn't mean that I can't find area. I just have to find another way to find out how much space this object takes up. Does anybody have any guesses of what we can do to find area here? Let's go to the next slide and find out. We can multiply the side lengths to find area, okay? So take a close look at my rectangle here. If you notice, I've taken the length of the long side and I've taken the length of the short side, okay? When we're measuring area, we don't need all the sides. We just need the long side and the short side, the length and the width to find area, okay? What we don't want to do is we don't want to look at the opposite sides because we'll end up with something that says 9 times 9, and that's incorrect, okay? So I want to use the sides that meet to make an angle. That will help me find area, okay? So what I do is I will take my long side, 9 centimeters, times 4 centimeters. Notice when I said that, boys and girls, I didn't just say 9 times 4. I said 9 centimeters times 4 centimeters, okay? After we multiply, we should say 9 centimeters times 4 centimeters equals 36 square centimeters. Now, notice I didn't say units. When we're talking about units, we're talking about any unit of measurement, okay? It can be centimeters, inches, kilometers, yards. Anything that you can use to measure distance, we can use to measure area, okay? So we'll say whatever that unit is, we say square that, okay? So here is centimeters, so it's square centimeters, all right? Let's try one together, you guys. So if I look closely at my rectangle, I have a long side of 8 yards and I have a short side of 3 yards. What did I say we could do to find area if we don't have the square units inside of the figure? If you said multiply, that is correct. Now remember, when you multiply, you do want to include your units. You don't have to actually use the entire word yards, you can abbreviate. So we abbreviate yards with the letter Y. So let's try that here. So I'm going to say 8Y for yards times 3Y yards equals. Now let's pretend we don't know that, even though I know you're smart and you do know it. I always tell my kids what you can do is pick one number to skip count, pick the other number to count by. So here, I'm going to skip count by 8 3 times, okay? So since I'm counting 3 times, I'm gonna hold up 3 fingers, and whatever I'm holding up at the end is my answer, okay? So let's hold up those 3 fingers and let's count by 8. Are you ready? Let's go. 8, 16, 24. So what's my area, guys? Now, I know a lot of you said 24, but what did I say? It is very important to include our unit at the end. So we can't just say 24. we have to say 24 square yards. And we abbreviate square as SQ. And I always spell out yards if I've already abbreviated the square part, okay? So our answer here is 24 square yards. Now, there is a way that you can be sure that this answer is correct, okay? If you want to make sure that this answer is correct, what you can actually do is take this and almost use it like a tape diagram, you guys, and you can actually draw your squares in the inside and count them just like we did before. When we do this, you'll see why we want a more quick and efficient way to measure area, because counting the squares this time will take us a lot longer. So we always use multiplication because it's quicker and it's easier than trying to make the squares and count them. But we are going to do it just for the sake of showing you that I should get the same answer when I put my tiles in as when I multiplied, okay? So let's try that. So let's look. I have my long side is 8 yards. So when I think about the number 8 and a tape diagram, I always tell my students, if you want 8 spaces, then you need, I tell them if whatever space you want, then you need 1 less line. So I have 8, I want 8 spaces, so that means I need 7 lines going down, okay? So let's try that. And it's not going to be perfect, guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And guys, it's not perfect, but it looks good enough, okay? So let's count it. Let's just make sure that we have 8 spaces to represent those 8 yards, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we're good there. Now, we're not done because we also have to represent these 3 yards. So remember, I told you if you want 3 spaces, then you're going to need 1 less. So I only need 2 lines going horizontally, okay? So let's try that. And I always tell my kids you want to estimate to partition, which means you kind of want to, it's not going to be perfect, but you kind of want it to look like all the squares are the same size, okay? So that's 1 line, and I'll do 2 right here. So now I need to just make sure, and I can visually see right here that I have 3 spaces. So I know I have 8 over here and 3 to represent those yards, okay? So now we're going to see why we don't always want to number our squares, because we have quite a lot of squares than we did the first time. So let's try it here, okay? All right, get ready. Are you ready? Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And if I stop right here, boys and girls, I can make sure that even if I didn't count my spaces, I know that if I stop, I should be stopping at 8 because I have 8 yards at the top, okay? So let's try, let's keep going. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Whew, now we see why we don't want to count those squares. Let's keep going. 21, 22, 23, 24. So boys and girls, you should see that when we numbered our squares, we got the same answer as we did when we multiplied, okay? Now here's my thing. If you check your answer and you end up with a number that does not match what you have up here, either you numbered your squares wrong or your calculation came out wrong and you're multiplying. So what you need to do is you need to go back to step 1 and see what you've done wrong, because your answer up here should match your answer down there, okay? They should be the same thing. Now, let's assume that we have the area now and we're missing a side length, okay? So let's look at what we have. I have the area of 12 square feet, and they actually gave me the long side, my length of 4 feet, okay? So, what I want you to notice the relationship between 4 and 12. Now, you should know by now that in order for us to find area, we have to multiply our long side by our short side. So what I want you to think about is, what is the inverse operation of multiplication? Because you do know that you have to multiply this unknown side by this long side, and you should get this. Now let's think about what I tell you in class. I always tell you, multiplication, well, division is just backwards what? Multiplication, right? So if you're thinking division, you are correct. If you look and see, it's actually a fact family, okay? So we got 4 feet times the unknown, and we got 12 square feet, okay? So that means if we use the inverse operation, we would get 12 square feet divided by 4 feet is 3 feet, which means my unknown side is 3 feet, okay? Let's try one together, okay, guys? Now, we can see that our area is 64 square units, okay? My side length is 8, my known side is 8 units, and I have an unknown side. So I already know that to find area, I have to do what? Multiply. So that would mean I have 8 times my unknown equals 64, guys. So how can I undo that multiplication? By division, okay? So let's start with our, you know that we always start with our large number when we're dividing, okay? So let's start with our large number, which is our total, our area, which is 64 square units. And we want to divide that by our what, guys? We want to divide it by our known side. So 64 divided by 8 equals. Now let's pretend like we don't know that either, okay? So what a lot of times my students get confused with the division part. They're great at multiplication, but the division part kind of confused them. And you can actually solve for division just like you do multiplication. It's just a little different. So this time when you're doing your count by, boys and girls, all you want to make sure that you do is you will have to absolutely count by 8s until you get to 64. Now, with this method, you have to make sure that you're using something to track how many 8s you have. So I always say it's perfectly okay to use your fingers if they help you, okay? At this point, I think that you should do whatever you have to do to get the correct answer. So if that means using your fingers or counting up or whatever you have to do to find the correct answer, you should absolutely do what makes you comfortable. So some people can just look at this and say, oh, 8 times something equals 64. Other people, they don't see it that way. They might have to do some kinesthetic learning. They might have to use their fingers or something. So that's okay too, all right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to count by 8s until I get to 64, okay? So let's try it. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64. How many fingers am I holding up? 8. You would be correct, you guys. So my missing side length is 8 units. Well, that's all I have for you today, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed our lesson, and then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll review what we learned today, and we will also learn about some applications or how we can use area to solve some word problems. Have a great day. Bye.